Welcome, Joe and Heather. Thank you for joining us today. We'll be talking about engaging with families. Can you please share difficult experiences that you've had as a YPSS engaging with the entire family?
Seems that a lot of the times texting does not work. You actually have to call. So, if texting does not, so if I call and text and I'm still not getting a hold of anyone via mom or youth, just who they say to reach out to, I'll talk to the therapist and let them know I'm struggling with engagement. The therapist should be able to have a conversation with the family and let them know that they are to answer or reply to me to the youth peer, or they'll have to continue youth peer services. Just think it's important to add that youth peer services should not be forced, and if they are not willing to participate, then they don't need to be seen. It's just simple as that. Like, a lot of the times core are like, you need to see a youth or you need to see a mentor, and sometimes they're just not engaged and not willing to work with me. So I think it's important that at the beginning of a like with a meet and greet, when you're meeting the family and the therapist, it's important to lay out all of these things, like, my service is not forced, and who's the best who's the best person to reach out to weekly to schedule stuff like that, just bringing that up in very beginning.
Yeah, Joe, I agree with you for sure. One of the things that stuck out to me with what you're talking about is it can be very empowering for a youth to just say, I don't want peer services, and that's totally okay.
Yeah.
I've had youth that I work with where maybe the first 2 weeks they kind of give it a try and they're like, I'm just not feeling it. And that's totally okay. Like if you're not
Hmm.
ready right now, that is totally fine. So it can be so empowering for them to be, like, hey, I'm too busy right now. I have too much going on. Can we just put it on hold? And it's nice for them to know they can always come back to it if needed.
Yes. Hmm.
One challenge that I've had with engaging families and trying to navigate the dynamics is sometimes parents or guardians may not think that the peer service is as serious. I've had a foster parent who told me that I need to step back from meeting with the youth because therapy is more important. And so I think in that situation, if you have a team that or a supervisor who is super, supportive and knows your role, getting them involved and just sitting down and advocating like this is a formal service. I'm a formal support. I'm not just a friend to go hang out with this person. Like this is an actual like therapeutic evidence-based thing that we're doing. Um, and I definitely think that that's super important. And just, bringing that up. And then in this situation, the team was not very supportive with it. So I went and had a meeting with the mom to be like, let's review what my service is. And this is what it's about. And this is why, I totally understand that therapy is also important, but how do we kind of collaborate schedules so I'm not overbooking when a therapist is or not getting in the way, so to speak.
Great discussion. Where do boundaries come into play when you're working with youth and families?
Boundaries are definitely very important when working with families and working with youth in general. Um, One of the main examples I can think of is I've had parents who want to know what me and the youth talk about during sessions. And I professionally, I'm not going to share that unless the youth okays that. So I'll have a conversation with the youth to be like, what are you comfortable sharing? Or even better, you can tell your parent what we talked about so that way you can talk about bring up as much or as little as you want to. And I let my youth know, obviously, with confidentiality, it is important. And, obviously why I would break it, such as, harming yourself or someone else. But um, definitely that tends to happen a lot where the parents want to know what we're talking about. But to me, that kind of can break the relationship with the youth to just kind of tell the parents everything that's going on. So I tend to stay away from that.
I usually introduce myself in the introduction session with the therapist, the family, the youth, and I always bring up that I will be able to respond in to them if they reach out during business hours like 8:30 through 5 Monday through Friday. I'm also sure to let them know that if there's a crisis they are not to reach out to me, but if they are just overwhelmed, having anxiety, and just need a listening ear, that I will be able to chat if they want to reach out during business hours just to discuss coping skills and everything. Also, if I'm going to take time off, I am sure to let the family know that in the session before I will be leaving and I will be unavailable by phone or email. So if they need anything, to reach out to the therapist.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, letting them know ahead of time, like if you have a planned vacation or if something's going on. One of the other boundaries that I think is crucial is the emotional boundary. Um, we do, have our own lived mental health experiences, and I've had families before ask me like, "Oh, what's your background in mental health, or what have you been in services for?" And, you know, my own boundaries, I don't really like to, like I'll share with my clients strategically, but like I don't need to open myself up to the family necessarily if it's not beneficial. So I politely just tell them, I do have a history going, being in the mental health services. At this time, I'm not really comfortable talking about that, but just be assured that, I'm competent to do my job and it's okay. Because I've had people that are like, oh, you're still struggling with your mental health or things like that. So I just think kind of that emotional boundary is definitely good to have.
Absolutely. And as far as family driven youth guided philosophy goes, how does that impact your work as a youth peer support specialist?
Family driven youth guided philosophy is definitely very important. You it's important to know that the family's voice and the youth voice are very important when it comes to decision making, treatment, appointments, things they want to talk about, all that stuff. One time that I did struggle with it is when, and it could just be because I like to be a helper and it's hard to sometimes not be the helper all the time. But when you notice a youth kind of maybe going down the wrong path and you want to step in, um, you have to kind of refrain from doing that because it's their decision in the end if they want to decide to do something. And you just have to be there to meet them where they're at and to support them with that. But letting them know that it's their self-determination and their autonomy and it's their right to do what they want to do.
I often had to validate the youth's frustration um about how them and their parent fight and do not get along very well. I had a youth who constantly fought with her mom, and they literally did that just about every single day. And I was able to strategically share because my mom and I had a similar relationship when I was in services. Um, but it seemed to be that after a couple months together, she opened up and we were able to come to an understanding that her and her mom's views of what is okay and what is not okay in the house may be different. Like literally every situation, their views might be different, but at the end of the day, her mom just wants what's best for her and she loves her and wants to keep her safe.
I love that you connected through lived experience in that example. How about culture? Are there any cultural nuances that youth peer support specialists should be thinking about when they're working with the whole family?
I think that when providing services to youth and young adults, being culturally sensitive is definitely important. Having that cultural humility of just being aware that I'm not the expert, the client and their family is on their own culture, is really important. And I think it's also really important that if you do mess up, whether it's somebody's pronouns or, somebody's culture, something that you do might, kind of get in the way or whatever, it's important to just apologize and to learn from that. And I think it's also important to just kind of know our own biases and to reflect on them so that way we're not getting in the way of providing the service. So definitely, looking at the family structure, it might be different from your own. Personally, I'm very family oriented. I'm really close with my family, and I have to be mindful that not everybody has had that same upbringing. So something that I might suggest for myself is not going to obviously work for someone, someone else. So I think just knowing that you're not the expert and to ask the family straight out, ask the youth about their culture if you really want to know. And just apologize if you do mess up, because it is sure to happen.
Being sensitive to other religions. There are conservative and liberal families. Some families are always yelling. That's just their normal day to day. And some families, it's rude to deny drinks and food from them. That's just how some families and cultures are. So you just want to keep all that in mind when you go into the home. You don't want to go into someone's home and offend them, so just pick up on those subtle cues.
I went into one of my used homes, and I just remember they were like, "Can you just take your shoes off?" And I was like, "Oh, okay." Like something that simple. It didn't even click with me, because my upbringing, like sometimes we'd walk in the house with our shoes on and it wasn't a big deal, but in other cultures or different, you know, places, it's like, no, you don't do that. Like that's a no-no. So I think just something like even that simple, can be offensive, and just remembering to like take into account the family and their culture, the neighborhood that they're in, even socioeconomic status, all of those different things can definitely play a role when considering how you're interacting with the family. Some cultures even like eye contact. Like I'm someone who's big on nonverbals. I love eye contact. I want to know you're listening to me. That can be so offensive to some people. And so I have to sometimes remember to like, don't just stare people down, Heather. Like you gotta can't be doing that, because maybe that's not how they communicate.
Exactly, just learning about the family from the family. Well, thanks so much, you guys. This has been so enlightening. Do you have any other thoughts on this topic of engaging with families?
Just know that it can definitely be challenging, but as long as you're trying and doing the best you can and advocating and meeting the client and the family where they're at, that's the main thing you can do.
Well, it has been great speaking to you both, Heather and Joe. Thank you so much for your insight today.